Alright, and this is the intro for the Paracord sleeving guide. I've had a lot of requests for the Paracord guide because, you know, a lot of you guys end up using it. You know, I will say right off the bat, I think Paracord can look nice if it's done right. It is shoelaces, it is a fabric type material, so most people don't like using it because it snags really easily and stuff. But if you use some tape, like I'll show you, you can sleeve with it just fine. If you get your heat shrink right, it looks very beautiful, and you know, a lot of color is really cheap. There's a lot of pluses, but there's also a lot of downs for it. So simply today, we're just going to be going over how to take your time with it, how to use it properly, and how to get some good results from using it. I will say, however, if you're going to jump into a Paracord guide or a Paracord sleeving project, you're going to want to take your time and you're going to want to set yourself up for a little bit of frustration because you'll be redoing a lot of them, and that's just, you know, kind of the nature of the product that you'll be using because it doesn't like to stay where it is. So I'm going to stop trashing it because I do like it to a point, and we're just going to jump right in. Thanks. Well, in front of you, what you'll see is the normal tools that I use for Paracord sleeving. If you notice anything between the difference of this video and the last video, there is not much difference except for the addition of some masking tape. And the masking tape, of course, is to wrap up the connectors. So I'm going to do two different ways to do this today. I'm going to do the MDPC way, which only involves the MDPC heat shrink, which I prefer because it's 4-to-1 and it grips and you don't have to put a lot of it on there. And then, of course, you know, a good, I don't know, I could say 70% of you guys are probably going to try to get the cheap heat shrink as well. And, you know, I don't necessarily deter people from doing that. It's a personal preference that I like to see the short heat shrink, but the longer heat shrink works if you do it right. So I'm going to do both methods. First method I'm going to do is the long heat shrink. Now, there's a few tricks to making this work out right for you, so I'm going to get my tools out of the way here. And most of you guys that are going to do the long heat shrink, out of the way there. If you do the long heat shrink, you're going to buy it like this. It's going to come in these big rolls, and it'd just be tubing. Now you're asking, what's the easiest way to cut this out, and what's the preferred length? Honestly, there isn't really a preferred length if you're going to be using this in Paracord. You're going to need it longer than the normal 15mm simply because it's not going to grip as much. And depending on what you get, either 3-to-1 or 2-to-1, you know, if you get adhesive lined, you know, I'm just going to say don't ever get adhesive lined. It looks nasty, the glue comes out of the ends, and you're just not going to want to mess with it. So I'll actually measure out and I'll show you how I do this. The easiest way is to make a jig, and I showed you this earlier under the advanced tools, I believe. If I didn't, I apologize, and I'll explain it right now. I did not create this. This was not an original idea by me. In fact, I don't know who the original maker was. The first jig I ever saw, though, like this was made by Oliver. So if he was the first one to make it, then give him credit, not me. As you can see, it's, you know, 4 pieces of wood and a few screws. It's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to go through a 20-step guide on how to use this thing. Basically, you make your heat shrink guide right there, and it goes right up against the edge, and that's where the knife's going to go. And you simply just cut. Now, you can measure each and every one of these, and you can do this by hand if you want. Let's move the carver out of there. And that's completely up to you. You can for sure do that. I prefer to do it this way because it's a lot faster, and I believe it's a lot more accurate, and everything is for sure the same. Now, this is 22mm is what I put these for. Again, that's not a preferred, that's not a standard, that's just what I had this jig set up for back in the day. I used that length for the Cathros mod, and when I did clean cut shrink, or clean cut sleeving as well, because it worked. I tried to go shorter, and that didn't really work out very well because the clean cut is really it's a really slick sleeve, and it's a little bit larger. Now I'm going to cut a few of these out real quick, and then I'm going to show you how you need to prepare these for when you sleeve. And I mean, look at this. You'd be sitting there trying to measure out each and every single one and using a cutter, and this just makes all the sense. And it's really easy to make. All you got to do is make sure you measure this right here when you make it. I don't think I paid anything for this because I already had the screws, and I just grabbed a couple pieces of wood that were already laying around the house. It was really simple. So now that you've got a few pieces of heat shrink ready for you here, here's the trick with this. You're going to want to open this end. If I can show you, you're going to want to open that end a little bit, and how you're going to do that is by using a needle nose plier. You simply put it in, and you just stretch out just a little bit. Don't go too hard too fast, because you'll split the shrink. And then you just keep spinning it and pulling out. What that's doing is making one of the ends a little bit larger, and this will completely make sense later when we have to put it onto the wire and onto the sleeving, because you know, paracord is shoelaces. It doesn't stay where it wants to. It's going to kind of move if you touch it, obviously. And so we're just going to quickly do that to all these other pieces here. I had some prepared, but you know, I really want to show you guys how easy this is. If you guys think it's going to take you a long time, it's really not. Once you get it down, it's really easy. And this is the same method that you'd want to use to, you know, expand your heat shrink to get it over the fan connector. You know, if your heat shrink is just barely too small to fit over something, all you need to do is do this. It's really easy. You just keep working it. Your heat shrink most of the time will expand quite a bit of ways before you'll snap it if you go slow. But here's the thing. It will always go back to what it was originally designed to go back to. So don't worry that stretching it is going to make it lopsided or something. As long as you're careful with it, it'll go right back to what it was originally intended to be. So we're going to start with this cable here. Now this is a tester cable of mine that I mess around with. The red wires are the wires that we're going to be working on right now, and I already removed one. But I'll be showing again how to remove one when we do the MDPC heat shrink method. So here's our wire. Paracord. Here is our lovely paracord. It very much looks like shoelaces. As you can see, unlike MDPC, it is very, let me say this, other than any other plastic sleeving, it's very malleable. It's soft. I mean, it'll do whatever you really want it to do. It also snags on everything. So that's where our cutter again comes in really handy. As you can see, here, let me get in there, get it to focus. As you can see here, the tip is really fuzzy. It just looks like garbage. That's not going to work out. So what we're going to do, we can grab our snip, go at a 90 degree again, and we're going to try to cut it as clean as possible. Now, without moving your finger as much as you possibly can, we're going to go ahead and we're going to light that up. Just barely melt it, taper it just like we did with the MDPC, and there we go. That's our end. It should look straight. It shouldn't be bubbled up too bad on the end. And don't worry if you melt the inside cord, that doesn't matter. So we're going to measure. And this, I really want to stress this out here. This measuring, it is different for every single wire. It depends on the gauge of wire, and it depends on the length of the wire. You're going to have to kind of test to see which measurement works the best for you. Whenever I start a new project, I always check and make sure what the gauge of wire is. And I'll be doing a guide later to try to give you guys an estimate of where you're going to need to do this depending on the sleeve. But it depends on the sleeving that you use, it depends on the gauge of the wire. And those are probably the two basic things that you're going to have to watch out for. But this right here is 18 gauge, so I know already where I'm going to need to put this on the pin. I'm going to put it right there. Right up to, if I can get a better shot of that, right up to that bottom part. There we go. Right underneath the first, can't get underneath the camera today. Right underneath that first buckle. So while I'm under there, I will pinch this in so it stays with the wire, and I will stretch it down. When I get to this other side, I will, just like the MDPC, I'm going to pull a little bit on the sleeving, but I'm going to leave the wire, obviously, because the wire is not going to stretch, only the sleeving. But I'm not going to stretch the sleeving to the breaking point. I just want a little bit of movement on it. And then I'm going to hold it right there, and you can see that's where I'm going to cut. So I'll grab my cutter. I already have my thumb where I want it to be cut. Get the wire out of there. And that's where I'm going to cut the wire. So, now, here's the deal. You will most likely see this. You'll see a little bit of the poofy side pop right out like that. Don't worry, just go ahead and melt it anyway. Now, if you can look at what I did, I was able to melt the edges of the actual sleeving without completely destroying that inside little bit right there, because any kind of heat's going to melt it, period, but it's not going to completely destroy it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab the inside guts, just like that, and pull them right out. And really there's no other word for that than guts. Kind of looks like little intestines, which is creepy altogether. And so if you've been watching some of these, it's all the same again, except for this part right here. This is where our masking tape comes into play. You're going to want to mask that entire head right there. All of it. No metal showing. If you have any kind of metal showing, it's going to catch a little bit. You know, that's not an entirely true statement, but it's always a rule of thumb that if you can cover all the silver, you're going to be fine. Because all it takes for paracord to, you know, stick on it a little bit is, really, it's all it takes is a little bit. So I just take a piece of tape, a little small one, and just like I'd be taping it off. Now I'm going to try to roll this as tight as I possibly can, because I need to get that sleeving on. And it should look something like that. And if you did that right, it'll expand a little bit over there. But literally, I'm pushing on the wire to get it through. Oh, no, I made the head a little bit fat. It's not going to work the way I want it to. But if you put just enough tape, you should be able just to push the wire in like I'm doing right now. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do the other method too, where, here, I'll even stop a little short. You can do the inch method with the paracord as well. Either one works. But if you taped it right, you should be able just to push it through, and it's really easy. So, and then you just remove the tape. If you can find the edge, which I have terrible eyes, so. And normally it's a lot easier to find it. And here's the deal, if you ever get stuck doing this, you just cut that thing right off. Most of the time it just comes right off. Most of the time. I did this one really tight. And I just made a mess out of it. But as long as you get that on there right, it's normally a lot easier than this. made quite the mess out of this one. I'm gonna do the other one. I'll show you how to not do this. And this is kind of what I meant about when I said in the intro that you gotta have a lot of patience and be willing to go through a little bit of frustration with this, because man, there are so many little steps that go into this. So now that we got our tape off here, well, thought I had all the tape off there. Clearly that was not the case. Alright, there we go. Now that you got the tape off of there, you're going to grab your LC sleeving tool and you're going to do the same thing. Now here's where it gets a little complicated, and this is why we stretched out that heat shrink. When I hold this up to the edge there, it's going to be on the edge. Now if this was MDPC, it wouldn't move as easy as it is right here. So if you see if that heat shrink pushes on it, it's going to push it right down, and then that's not going to be at the spot where you want it to anymore. So let me measure it out again here. And we'll grab the end of the heat shrink that we expanded, and we'll watch the sleeve as we put it in, and I kind of twist it as I put it on to make sure it doesn't catch. And then I put the sleeving, or not the sleeving, but the heat shrink right up against that little knob like we did last time. I'm just going to heat it up. Again, making sure that it's all the way where it needs to be, up against the edge there. And then I'm going to hit that tip up just a little bit more. And then I'm going to blow her down, kind of cool down the heat shrink. And the reason I hit that tip up a little bit more was so that I could get a little bit of it in the connector. You can do that with Paracord if you melt it just a tiny bit, and that's why it's so important to get a clean cut and that you're not melting a ton of it on the tip. And just like the other one, we're going to stretch it out. Same method as the MDPC, just grab on the bottom, pinch one side so you don't pull it out of the connector, and then you just stretch it right out. And when you got it right on the other side, again, you grab the side of the heat shrink that you stretched out a little bit, and you watch, make sure you're not pushing down the sleeve when you're putting it on. Like I said, I like to twist it a little bit as I'm putting it on there. And I put it right on that edge there again. Oh, and I moved it away a little bit. There we go. Now you should already be able to see the difference between this and an MDPC heat shrunk wire. It's a lot more heat shrink. And again, like I said earlier, that's because it doesn't grip as much, so it needs a little bit more surface area to grip right on there. So I'm going to grab my tester strip here with all my testing wires on it. And again, same thing with this. If it's really, really soft, then we're not going to want to put it in here. We want it to still be warm to the touch, and so that it's a little bit malleable, but if it's really, really soft, all you're going to do is scrunch it up and you'll have to restart over. So we're just going to put it right in there. It's kind of hard with these, but I get a straight path. Oh, there we go. And there we go. Maybe you can see that. Now if you're wondering why it looks a little wobbly, my camera's not the best there, but that should show you. Now that's the difference between, those are MDPC shrunk ones and those are the long versions. They both look fine. I prefer this. That's just my personal preference. But honestly, if you take your time, like I just showed you, and you follow all those little, tricks and tips, I guess you could call them, you'll get straight just like this, and it looks just fine. And it works out. And you can use some cheaper heat shrink if you want, and you can use all the paracord you ever needed. But we're going to show you really quick on how to do the MDPC version. It's just the same. There's really not much difference, so I'm going to try to speed through this a little bit more. The only thing with the MDPC shrink is that you do not need to stretch out any of the ends, because it should just work. And you know what? I didn't grab any red heat shrink on me, so I'm going to have to walk right over here and grab it. How's that for being prepared? I wasn't prepared at all. And good gosh, I don't even know where it is. Can you imagine that? Losing something. Well, I have some right here. And I better make it good, because all I could find was 2 pieces. So, again, on how to remove this, some of you guys have been asking me already, and this is a good time to show you. This is an extension end. It plugs right on in to your other cables to make an extension, and that's what this is. If you want to know how to remove these pins, it is the same thing as doing the other ones. If you can see in there, if I can get it to focus, you can kind of see it in there. You can see little shiny dots. All that is a pin. And you're going to put it in there just the same, sideways. Oh, just like that. Try to look at the camera and do it. And it'll fit, and you'll hear it click in a certain spot in there. Yeah, and it'll fit right in. And if you can get it to come out, it'll come out just like that. Now here, let me show you this pin really quick. It has the wings. Oh, come on, focus. It has the wings on the side, just like the other ones. My camera does not like this. On the little sides here, there's wings. And what you're doing is you're using this tool, if that makes sense right there, using this tool to press down those wings. And that's how it pops out. So it's just like the other pins, it's just an open end. You don't have so much of a guide. Like on these ones, you're literally just putting it on the sides here. But there's 2 little notches on the inside of those connectors. If you can ever get some light in there, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So, the way we're going to do this with MDPC shrink is, and again, I'm just going to zoom through this one. I'm going to clean up my end here. And I will melt it. And then I will measure it out. Again, if you use a different gauge of wire, your little measurement parts are going to be different. What I mean by that is, instead of measuring on the underneath of this pin, you might have to measure it from up here. Here, let me get you something to point at here. Instead of measuring from down here, you're going to want to measure it from up here. And that'll be the difference that you'll need to do, because when you're putting your sleeving over something and it expands, what it's going to do is it's going to take up some of that length, so it's not going to be able to stretch as far as it can. So what you're going to have to do is compensate for that. And you can actually, on some wires, you might almost have to go pretty clear up to here. It just depends on which one it is and what you're working with. So in case you're ever grabbing a wire just off of, an Enermax power supply that has 16 gauge, and you try to put it to the same spot, and then you're wondering, well, what the heck, Lutro said that if I put it right here it'll work. Yes and no. You might have to experiment a little bit and find a spot on here where it's going to work best for you. And again, that depends on what sleeving you're using, if you're using a thinner gauge or, you know, a wider gauge. Everything that I've been using in my guide so far has been 18 gauge, so you can be pretty safe. If your power supply uses 18 gauge, you're fine. So we got our other side of our wire here. Pull out the guts. And if your guts stick a little bit, just pull a little harder, it'll come right out. That sounds incredibly gross. And again here we're gonna get everything out of the way. Try not to have a messy workplace, but while you're sleeving sometimes it just happens. Take a piece of tape. And try to cover up your connector as tight as you can, as best as you can. Obviously I messed that one up. Now the reason I'm doing it this way, and you can do it by tying a rope or tying one of the little guts on it and pulling it through, but if you do it this way, you're not going to get a bunch of little snags on this, because once you start getting little snags on this, you'll have little bumps everywhere and it looks terrible. So just take the time and the aggravation and go ahead and use some tape. That way it's not going to stick on everything. And honestly, this is, if you get the right amount of tape on there, it is no harder than the other way. As you see, I'm just pushing the wire through like last time. The only frustrating part of all this is getting the tape off. But if you did it like I just did it right there, it comes right off. Unlike the first example I showed you, which was retarded and ridiculous. Which is not the way it normally happens. So, MDP C-shrink. I'm going to measure it out like I normally do. And the only thing here is I don't need to stretch it out. All I got to do is plop it right on there. And again, I'm still going to melt that tip a little bit. Because I want it to stay on there where I want it to be. And we're just going to stretch her out again. And on these extension pins, it's the same thing. You just put it right up to the two little prongs there, if I can show you. This is the extension pin. No, don't focus on the gun camera, on the world. There we go. There's the two little pins. Tool goes right up in there. And you measure out the sleeve by the edge of the LC sleeving tool here. If I can get a straight shot at it. There we go. I'm going to double check that. Didn't look right. And it's not. So I'm going to re-stretch it out. And there we go. And I lost my other piece of red heat shrink, because it probably blew it off the table with my heat gun. How smart was that? That was phenomenal. So as I dig for another piece of heat shrink here, well, you know what? I'll just use a black one. So I can't find the other one for some odd reason. So again, you just put the heat shrink up to the same guide as you did on the other one, the same place where you put the LC sleeving tool. And then, oh, wait a minute. There it is. I found my red piece. So I'm going to put the actual piece I wanted to use on there. And I'm going to shake it up. And if you're ever using MDPC with a heat gun and you use like red and you see it start turning purple a little bit on you, don't worry about it. Just it likes to do that for some reason. But it'll go right back to a vibrant red if you let it cool down. Alright, there's our wire. And then all you got to do is plop her on in. Again, make sure that it's not completely malleable, that you want it to be a little bit stiff at the same time, so you can get it right into there, in the connector there. Always have fun trying to find the right side on these. But little time, you can pop it right on it. And then, of course, this one's cooled down, so give it a little heat. And pop it right on in there. And these look phenomenal. I like this look, and again, that's just preference. Either one that you want to do is completely up to you. You can make this look as nice as you're willing to take your time and have some patience. You'll end up redoing a lot of these in the beginning. Eventually you'll get it down and you'll be able to eyeball it a lot, and you'll realize when your sleeving's moving. But really, it's just patience. You know, you should, by this point when you're starting your project, you should have all your tools that you need. You should have you know, a lot of the knowledge that you're going to need. The biggest part, again, is going to be on your part. It's going to be how much patience do you have to not waste, you know, the time and the money that you've invested into this. So take your time. If you have any questions, you run into any snags, again, like I said, I'll try to be going over a lot of the different links and trying to show you guys where the exact spot to measure your sleeve's going to be, but it's all going to be depending on, like I said, what type of engage of sleeving you're going to use and type of wire. But it's pretty self-explanatory. All of this is very simple. I hope that you enjoyed the guide, and that's all. So that was the Paracord sleeving guide. As normal, if you guys have any questions, you guys can just go ahead and PM me, send me a message, email me. Most of you guys that have ordered my tool, you guys have my email address and you can get a hold of me that way. But that was it. You know, Paracord can be a good material to use if you just take some time, and I'm going to try not to get myself killed talking to the camera and driving at the same time. I don't ever suggest doing this. But if you just take your time and you pay attention to the details, and if you're willing to, you know, have to redo it a few times, you're going to get good results with it. So that's all I got for you today, and thanks for following. That's it. You looking at your finger?
Picking your nose.
Dude.
I don't know how to turn it off. What do I do?